12 red flags of a narcissist you shouldn't ignore. They gaslit you, manipulated you, told you that you were too much and not enough in the same breath. And the worst part, they left you questioning whether they were right. Trust me, they weren't. And as we explore these 12 red flags of a narcissist, you'll understand exactly why and how to avoid falling into their trap again. Coming up, we'll break down each red flag from the ones you'll see early on to what it looks like when they become more bold. And stay tuned till the end because we're going to cover some of the red flags you'll always see in any narcissist. Consider these like their tell. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and I'm a toxic relationship recovery coach. And if you think you've had a relationship with a narcissist, I've got a free checklist that can help you see how your own experience stacks up to the phases of narcissistic abuse. And you'll find a link for that in the description. So let's kick this list off from the very beginning with the love bombing phase, also known as the too good to be true phase. So, first, it's unlike anything you've ever experienced. Someone finally sees you, truly sees you, in a way that no one ever has before. And sure, maybe something feels a little bit off. The intensity might feel overwhelming, but you convince yourself that this is just what real love is supposed to look like. Like in the fairy tales. But this, I promise you, is no fairy tale. And love bombing is not love. How could it be? We're talking about someone you wouldn't have even recognized in a crowd just a few weeks or months ago. But narcissists use this technique to create an illusion of a perfect connection. So they'll shower you with excessive attention, grand gestures, and seemingly genuine intimacy. And they do all this because they're idealizing you at that moment. And it feels genuine to you because there is a genuine element to it. Even though when all is said and done, it's hard to believe. But to understand love bombing by a narcissist, we have to understand that narcissists are natural manipulators. So even though they might really think you're amazing in those love bombing moments, they're also using flattery to get what they really need from you. And that's your undying affection. So it's really more about the way you adore them in these times that makes them think you're so special. And that all comes crashing down before too long. But for now, let's talk about what love bombing does to the target of all this attention. So it leads you to feel more connected to someone you barely know. You might feel like it's your soulmate or a twin flame of sorts. And while they're working overtime to get you to let your guard down and get comfortable with them, they'll pull out all the stops. One of those is a little something we call mirroring. This is when they show up knowing exactly who you are before you even fully know yourself. So every interest you have becomes their passion. That childhood story you thought no one would understand, suddenly it feels like a shared experience. They're interested in everything about who you are. But this isn't connection, it's manipulation. And what they're doing here is part mirroring and part lying or stretching the truth. And mirroring can be really tricky to spot because it's something we all do naturally when we feel a genuine connection. So when we see someone mirroring our gestures, our tone of voice, or excitement level, it feels genuine, it feels real. And to be clear, it's not something we typically even notice. If you're noticing that someone is mirroring your gestures, your volume, or your tone of voice, they might be doing it on purpose. Because when it's natural, mirroring typically goes undetected. But with that said, if you're looking for it, you might notice it whether it's natural or manipulative. So, on its own, mirroring isn't really a reliable way to tell if someone's manipulating you. But when it goes with other things that create a too good to be true picture, like sharing every interest, point of view, or hobby, definitely pay attention. Either you just met your best friend or your worst nightmare. And really, the most dangerous part of the narcissist's efforts to force a connection is that you feel like you're finally being seen, maybe for the first time in your life. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard the phrase, I felt seen, when clients are describing the early days with a narcissist. This is why. The narcissist is forcing what should be a natural sign of connection to make you feel like you're more connected than you are. And the sad reason so many people fall into this is because they've never felt seen quite in that way before. So when they feel that intense connection, it really feels real and it feels good. It feels good to be seen. We can't deny that, right? So now let's talk about when and how the narcissist presses the fast forward button on your relationship. So, one obvious way a narcissist will do this is by suggesting that you escalate the relationship. So, maybe you move in together or maybe you get married, whatever they can do to expedite your connection and your commitment. Because once they have you on the hook, they know it's only a matter of time before you start seeing cracks in the facade. And so it's more convenient for them to have some sort of commitment before that happens. And sometimes they'll follow through on these commitments and sometimes not. We call that future faking. But I really want to talk about something that you may not be aware of just yet. So, another lesser known way a narcissist can press the fast forward button is by asking you to do favors for them. And I know this seems counterintuitive. You'd think you'd feel more fond of someone who does favors for you, right? But there's something called the Benjamin Franklin effect that some narcissists use to their advantage because it gets you feeling all warm and fuzzy about them. So, in the words of Benjamin Franklin, he who has once done you a kindness will be more ready to do you another than he whom you yourself have obliged. So essentially, you're more likely to do favors for people if you've done favors for them before. More likely, in fact, than for people who have done favors for you. But the real question is, why do we feel better about someone after we've done them a favor? So a 2015 study found that participants who followed through on requests from others generally liked those people more than the people who did not ask them for favors. And interestingly enough, people who did nice things for other people without being asked didn't seem to have that same effect. They didn't seem to have that fondness for the other person that they did when the other person asked them to do a favor and they followed through. So the part about being asked for the favor seems to be the key to this connection here. And my guess is that there's a level of flattery involved when someone asks you for something. You have something they need. And when you follow through on that favor, you get to feel good about yourself for doing something nice. In the case of Benjamin Franklin, where this concept all began, someone seemed to not like him, so he asked that guy to borrow a book that he knew that man owned. And so naturally, Benjamin Franklin returned that book in a reasonable amount of time, and he also included a little nice note. And this man, who wouldn't even speak to Franklin previously, ended up becoming a good friend. So, moral of this story, if you're seeing other red flags and someone asks you for a favor, maybe think twice about doing it. That favor may cost you more than you realize. So, moving along now, the honeymoon phase is over and the real manipulation begins to become more obvious. So, like it has all along, it begins gradually and increases in increments over time. So, let's talk about one of the first things you'll notice as the devaluation phase begins. And that's the subtle put downs disguised as jokes. One saying that comes to mind here is the greatest truths are said in jest. So typically, when someone says something about you and they're joking, there's some kernel of truth in there. Even if they're ironically saying the opposite of what they mean, they're calling attention to something about you that maybe they don't like. Or they're just doing it to make you feel self conscious. Either way, it's wrong. But the reason why this is typically among the first red flags in the devaluation phase is because there's a whole lot of plausible deniability behind this one. They can just say, oh, it was just a joke, and I didn't mean it. And then they're off the hook. So, narcissists often use humor to test your boundaries. So, don't let them get away with it. Give them an inch, and they will take a mile. So, another thing you'll notice early on is that there are some double standards emerging. So, for example, they may want all the details on what's going on with you, but you're beginning to get the feeling that their lives are much more guarded. So they'll grill you on why you took so long to answer a text or what you did on a night out with friends. But if you ask the same questions of them, they'll accuse you of being jealous or controlling. And before too long, nothing is off limits for them, and they'll use all this knowledge to drive a wedge between you and the people you love. They might imply that your friends and family don't understand you or are problematic. And slowly you become isolated when you were just trying to keep the peace. And that in itself is such a major red flag of a toxic relationship. If you're spending large amounts of time keeping the peace in your relationship, something isn't right. So now let's talk about another red flag that's common among narcissists, and that's the victim complex. This is kind of like when they take that Ben Franklin effect a little too far. So they always need something from you or from someone else. Or they're just always down in the dumps and you feel the need to rescue them. Because maybe you know that they've had a traumatic life and feel like maybe they just need a little kindness. But the problem here is when the sunk cost fallacy comes into play. So you think about all the time you invested in helping this person already. It's been a lot of time, right? And if you walk away now, all that time was for nothing. So you invest a little more and a little more. And along the way, every once in a while, they'll throw you some breadcrumbs to make you think your efforts are paying off. But it's just to keep you on the hook. So, if you're noticing that someone is always in need of your help or your grace, and you have little to nothing to show for your efforts, remember the sunk cost fallacy. And there's also that old saying that you're throwing good money after bad. That applies here too. But here, it's probably not money that you're throwing at this person, right? It's time, it's effort, and it's your emotional well being. These are all the things that you're spending every time you choose to play into their victim complex. So look for signs that they're genuinely trying to help themselves before you even get involved. So now at this point, if you're still in a relationship with this person, you would be headed deep into the devaluation phase, where gaslighting slowly begins and gradually gets worse over time. So let's talk about the narcissist's gaslighting habits. And to be clear, gaslighting isn't just lying. It can be lying, certainly. It can also be stretching the truth. But the ultimate goal behind gaslighting is to make you question your own sanity. And the most terrifying part is that it happens so gradually that you probably won't even notice the changes in yourself. So, according to psychoanalyst Robin Stern, it starts with disbelief. This is where you're making excuses for them, which leads to defense, which is where you're starting to collect evidence to prove your side of things. You're no longer making those excuses. You know that this is a battle of sorts and you're building your case. But eventually, it all leads to depression if you remain in that situation. So, these are really important red flags to recognize. And there are three gaslighting specific red flags that we're going to cover right now. The first is twisting reality. This is when the narcissist will look you dead in the eye and tell you that something you experienced never happened. They may also say you're remembering it wrong. And they can be incredibly convincing, especially when this is done in an all out attack on your memory or your sanity. So it's just one little piece of that puzzle. When gaslighting is intense, it touches everything. There doesn't have to be a reason for the narcissist to question your reality because their overall goal, their big reason, is to make sure you doubt yourself at every turn. Their goal also may be to make you look crazy in front of other people. So while they're twisting reality, they may also bait you into a reactive abuse situation where you get angry and double down on your position that they've already discredited to everyone. So not only does it look like you're losing it, but you could also appear emotionally unstable. And that's some pretty intense gaslighting. But there are also plenty of narcissists out there who will gaslight you situationally. So if they're lying or cheating, they'll deny, deflect, and gaslight you about it. And their gaslighting may be limited to the things that they're trying to hide. Nevertheless, they are, make no mistake about it, they are trying to make you feel crazy. So it's more than just lying, it's gaslighting. And that brings us to the next tool in their gaslighting arsenal, which is attacking your feelings. So, this is where the narcissist will tell you you're too sensitive, you're overreacting, or you're just making a big deal out of nothing. They may even tell you that you're feeling something that you're not. So, they may tell you you're angry when you're not angry, or you're jealous when you're not feeling jealous. Yes, they are that bold. But no matter what, no one has the right to tell you what or how much to feel. And finally, the cherry on top of their gaslighting pie, rewriting history. So, this is when they'll point out all your wrongdoings and conveniently leave out their own. So, that reactive abuse situation becomes you lashing out for absolutely no reason, like you always do, apparently. And of course, they are the innocent victim. So, the next red flags we're going to talk about are major signs that you're actually dealing with a narcissist. And you may notice any of these at any point in the relationship, even in the love bombing phase. And if you do notice any of these signs, definitely pay attention to what else is going on. If you can be certain that the red flag you're seeing is a personality trait of theirs, it's probably best to hit the road. But since people are complicated and none of us are perfect, we sometimes do need to pay attention to multiple subtle signs instead of just one raging red flag, simply because sometimes that's how things present themselves. So, the red flags to look for are entitlement, lack of empathy, and jealousy or sabotage. So, these, especially the first two, are a given with all narcissists. But when we're dealing with a covert narcissist, they may be a little bit harder to spot. So, take entitlement, for example. Any narcissist who doesn't get their way is going to throw a fit in one way or another. But this fit will look different depending on the person. So, the covert narcissist is much more likely to use passive aggressive methods when throwing their fit. So, you may be met with the silent treatment, stonewalling, or just rude sarcasm instead of yelling or verbal aggression. But no matter what this looks like, this comes from a deep feeling of entitlement. They truly believe you owe them. And when they don't get their way, when you don't give them what they feel is rightfully theirs, they're going to punish you. So now let's talk a bit about the lack of empathy. It's difficult for most of us to spot because, well, let's be frank, I don't think most of us really knew this was a thing. So for me, until I met someone who severely lacked empathy, I thought it was very rare and only applied to the most severe psychopath or sociopath. And so, therefore, I thought it would be obvious if I spotted someone like that. And yes, you could argue that narcissism is rare. I see those comments, but I'm going to save that argument for another day. So, now let's talk about jealousy and sabotage. These two often go hand in hand. That's why I lump them together. It's not uncommon for a narcissist to have enemies or to be competing with other people, even when those people have no idea that they're competing. So if someone else is winning, the narcissist may go out of their way to sabotage that person. And it could be as simple as bad mouthing someone at a party because they look better or they're getting more attention, or maybe a combination of both. So, what else could a narcissist be jealous of? Well, ultimately, anything. They could be jealous of your ability to connect with others on a deeper level, or they could be jealous of your natural good nature. They could be, and often are, jealous of other people when you spend time with them. And for the record, that's not sweet, especially if there's a narcissist behind it, because they don't necessarily even want to spend time with you themselves. They just don't want you to spend time with other people. And this is one of the many reasons you end up so confused after a relationship with a narcissist. Nothing makes sense. They're even likely to convince you to break your plans with someone else to hang out with them, and then they ghost you at the last minute. And actually, the only way it does make any sort of sense is if you understand narcissism. And even then, it's hard to wrap your head around. This is why it's so important to be able to spot the red flags and to work on your own vulnerabilities so you become much less appealing to people like this. But if you've gotten to this point in the relationship with a narcissist where there's devaluation and maybe even multiple discards at this point, it's still not too late to cut ties. You can take back control at any point by setting boundaries and cutting contact as much as possible. And if you're wondering how the narcissist will handle your newfound power, watch the video that just popped up on the screen, and I'll see you next time.